Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to speak to you not simply from a place of intellect, but from a place of spirit, of deep belief and of divine expectation. I want to speak to your heart, your hope, and your destiny. I want to talk to you about something far greater than circumstances, far deeper than surface level blessings. I want to talk to you about God's favor. Not just as a comforting concept, but as a transformative power that is about to shift the very course of your life. We all go through seasons, some bright and filled with joy, and others dark and drenched in struggle. There are moments when it feels like everything is falling apart, when doors keep closing, prayers seem unanswered, and we wonder if we've been forgotten. We question our purpose, our worth, and sometimes even our faith. But I'm here to tell you today that even in those dry, silent seasons, something is happening behind the scenes. God has not forgotten you. He has not abandoned you. He has not overlooked you. In fact, in the silence, He's preparing something extraordinary because His favor is about to be revealed in your life. When we speak of favor, we're not talking about random luck or temporary good fortune. God's favor is not based on our performance, perfection, or pedigree. It's not about whether you have the right background, the right education, or the right connections. God's favor is a divine force that chooses, anoints, elevates, and opens doors no human hand could open. It's not fair, and it's not earned. It's given by grace. And here's the truth. When God decides to favor you, no opposition can stop it. No delay can cancel it. No enemy can block it. God's favor bypasses protocol, accelerates destiny, and breaks limitations. Some of you have been in waiting season so long that you've almost forgotten what it feels like to expect something good. You've grown comfortable in disappointment, almost numb to hope. But I declare to you today that your season of delay is turning into a season of divine favor. God is about to turn the page in your story, and what He is about to do is going to surpass anything you've ever seen. Let me remind you of something powerful. Throughout the Bible, the lives that were most transformed were touched not by logic or natural ability, but by favor. Joseph was a prisoner one day, and by the next, he was second in command over all of Egypt. That's not talent alone. That's not networking. That's not strategy. That's favor. Ruth was a foreign widow picking up scraps in a field, and God's favor led her into a new beginning, into a legacy that would eventually bring forth King David and generations later, Jesus Himself. Esther was an orphan in exile, but favor brought her before a king and used her to save a nation. Over and over again, it is favor that breaks the patterns of the past and ushers in the plans of God. God's favor is not something you have to chase, it's something you prepare for. You don't have to manipulate or force things to happen. When God's hand is on your life, things will begin to align in ways you cannot explain. You'll start seeing opportunities that others missed. You'll walk into rooms you weren't invited to. And your name will be spoken in places you've never been. That's what favor does. It magnifies what seems small. It multiplies what seems insufficient. It qualifies the unqualified. I want to speak directly to those of you who feel overlooked. Maybe you've been faithful in private, doing the right things with little reward. Maybe you've been praying, believing, working hard, and still wondering when the breakthrough will come. I want you to hear this clearly. Every seed you've sown in faith, every tear you've cried in surrender, every time you chose obedience over convenience, God saw it. Heaven records it. And in due season, favor will find you, not because you're perfect, but because you're positioned. Positioning matters. God favors those who are aligned with Him. That means living with integrity when no one's watching. That means being faithful in small things even when they seem insignificant. That means trusting God's timing even when your patience wears thin. Because when you are positioned in faith, favor will follow. And it won't just bless you, your family, your community, your generation will feel the ripple effect of the favor that's coming upon your life. We're entering a time where sudden shifts are going to become normal. What took others years will take you months. What seemed impossible will become reality, not because you figured everything out, but because God stepped in. There's a shift in the atmosphere, a divine acceleration. Some of you are about to be catapulted into purpose. Some of you are about to step into rooms you never imagined entering. Some of you are about to experience healing in places you thought would always be broken. You're not just going to be restored, you're going to be elevated. You're not just going to recover, you're going to overflow. Because God's favor transforms. Don't let your past disqualify you from receiving this. Some of you have been carrying shame, guilt, and regret for far too long. You've disqualified yourself in your own mind. But favor isn't about your mistakes. It's about God's mercy. David was an adulterer and a murderer, yet he was still called a man after God's own heart. Why? Because he knew how to repent, how to humble himself, and how to pursue God. Your past doesn't cancel your future. In fact, the very thing you thought disqualified you might be the testimony that reveals God's power through you. God is in the business of redemption. He turns ashes into beauty. He takes the mess and makes a masterpiece. His favor doesn't just elevate you, it restores your identity. You are not your failures. You are not your circumstances. You are who God says you are, chosen, beloved, set apart for a purpose. You don't need everyone to approve of you. You don't need everyone to understand you. Favor doesn't require the crowd's affirmation. In fact, sometimes the sign that you're walking in favor is that others begin to oppose you. Don't be discouraged by the resistance. Opposition is often confirmation that you're on the right path. When the enemy can't destroy you, he tries to distract you. But stay focused. Stay anchored, stay expectant, because what God is about to do in your life is not small, it's not ordinary, it's going to make people stop and say, that had to be God. And when the favor comes, and it will come, remember to stay humble. Favor is not just for you to be blessed, it's for you to be a blessing. When doors open, bring others with you. When provision comes, be generous. When promotion comes, use your platform to glorify God. Favor is a responsibility. It's not just for comfort, it's for impact. You were favored for influence. You were favored to reflect God's goodness to a world in need. Some of you need to shake off the dust of disappointment and dare to believe again. You've let too many no's steal your hope. You've let too many setbacks shape your expectations. But I declare this is a new chapter. The favor of God is rewriting the script. The things that didn't make sense are about to become clear. The waiting wasn't wasted, it was preparation. And now the door is opening. Lift your eyes, lift your faith, expect miracles, expect open doors, expect favor to rest on you like a mantle, because it's not coming, it's already in motion. God's favor is about to transform your life. Your story is about to shift from struggle to strength, from survival to significance, from delay to destiny. The transformation will not just be in what you receive, but in who you become. Let this be the season where you walk boldly, pray courageously, love deeply, and live fully. Let this be the season where you stop playing small, stop hiding, stop doubting. You were created for more. You were created to shine. And God's favor is the wind that is about to carry you into the very places you once only dreamed about. God's favor is unmerited and powerful. It is not something we can work hard enough to earn, perfect ourselves enough to deserve, or be religious enough to achieve. It is a gift, freely given by a loving God, extended not because of who we are, but because of who He is. We live in a world that rewards effort, performance, and credentials. Promotions come with resumes, opportunities come with references, and recognition comes through achievements. But the kingdom of God operates differently. God does not favor us based on our resume. He favors us based on His grace. This kind of favor defies logic. It doesn't make sense to human minds because it's not transactional. It's not a reward for good behavior. It's a revelation of God's nature. He chooses the weak to confound the strong, the overlooked to rise above the qualified, the broken to carry his beauty. God's favor chooses the unlikely and lifts them into places where their background should have excluded them. This is why so many stories in the Bible are about people who came from nowhere, who had no influence, no wealth, and often had a shameful past, but they were chosen. Why? Because God's favor was upon them. When his favor rests on someone, the natural rules no longer apply. What was supposed to take 10 years can happen in one. What was impossible becomes inevitable. What others worked for tirelessly, you may walk into by divine positioning. When God's hand is on your life, people will try to figure out how you got there, and all you can say is, God made a way. And he did, because that's what favor does. It makes a way where there is none. No amount of opposition can stop favor. You could have every door closed in front of you, every voice saying no, every reason to quit, but if God has placed his favor on your life, those doors will eventually open, or he'll create new ones just for you. Think of David. He was a shepherd boy, not even invited to the meeting where the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king. He wasn't even considered. But when favor is on your life, you cannot be ignored forever. God called him out of obscurity and anointed him in the presence of those who overlooked him. That's what favor does. It places you in rooms where your name was never mentioned. It gives you opportunities your experience didn't qualify you for, and it protects you in situations that should have broken you. Favor is a shield. It's a covering. It's a force. And it's not just for people in the Bible. That same favor is active today, and it's being released into the lives of people who trust him, not perfectly, but humbly. People who say, God, I may not have it all together, but I know you do, and I'm putting my life in your hands. When you stop trying to earn favor and start living in the awareness that it's already been offered through Christ, you'll begin to move differently. You won't chase after the approval of people. You'll walk in the confidence of someone already chosen by God. You won't beg for opportunities. You'll trust that the right ones will come in God's time. You won't be discouraged by rejection because you'll realize that man's denial doesn't cancel heaven's decision. What God has ordained, no man can undo. God's favor is not a one-time gift. It's a continual covering. It goes before you, making crooked paths straight. It walks beside you, giving you peace that doesn't make sense. And it follows you, ensuring that goodness and mercy are never far behind, even when you face trials, and you will. The favor of God doesn't disappear. In fact, it shines brightest in adversity. It will keep you when others fall, lift you when you feel defeated, and remind you that you are not walking alone. So don't disqualify yourself. Don't count yourself out. Favor is not about being flawless. It's about being willing. Willing to believe that God can do more than you imagine, willing to receive grace where you've only known striving, willing to let go of your plans so you can embrace his, because his favor, though unearned, is the most powerful force in your life, and when it rests on you, everything begins to change. Not by might, not by power, but by his Spirit. That's the power of favor. That's the promise you're about to walk into. Transformation comes through divine timing. While we often long for immediate answers and instant change, God's process rarely operates on our schedule. His timing is not driven by impatience, but by wisdom. He sees the entire picture, past, present, and future, while we only see a fragment. And in that grand design, he sometimes allows us to walk through waiting seasons, not to punish us, but to prepare us. These seasons are uncomfortable, often quiet and filled with questions, but they are never wasted. In fact, they are some of the most important and transformative times in our lives. Waiting on God is not about inactivity, it's about trust. It's not just sitting around hoping things will magically change. It's about continuing to move in faith, continuing to obey even when there's no visible reward, and continuing to believe when everything around you says otherwise. In these moments, God is working behind the scenes, shaping your character, strengthening your spirit, removing what cannot go with you into your next season. There are things we may be praying for that we're not yet ready to carry. So God, in His mercy, delays the outcome, but never the purpose. One of the most powerful truths about divine timing is that when the moment comes, change doesn't happen gradually, it happens suddenly. It may look like nothing is happening for years, and then in a moment, everything shifts. One connection, one open door, one phone call, one opportunity, and everything changes. That's how divine timing works. God doesn't always build slowly. Sometimes He releases things suddenly. But those sudden moments are always the result of seasons of preparation. They are birthed in the quiet, in the faithful, unseen places where you kept showing up even when nothing seemed to be happening. Think of Joseph. He had dreams of leadership, of influence, of greatness. But before he ever reached the palace, he went through betrayal, slavery, false accusations, and years in prison. To the outside world, it looked like those years were wasted. But in God's plan, they were necessary. It was in those places that Joseph developed the strength, humility, and wisdom he would need when he was finally promoted. And when the time was right, it happened in a moment. He woke up in a prison and went to sleep in a palace. That's the kind of transformation divine timing brings. The truth is, we often want the blessing without the process. We want the promise without the patience, but it's in the process that we're refined. It's where our faith is tested, where we learn to walk by trust and not by sight. And it's in this space that God does some of His deepest work. He heals what's been broken, removes what's been toxic, and rebuilds what's been lost. You may not see it with your eyes, but the soil of your life is being cultivated for growth. And when the rain comes, when favor is released, it will produce fruit that lasts. God's timing also teaches us surrender. It reminds us that He is in control, not us, and while that can be frustrating at times, it's also freeing. You don't have to manipulate force or stress over every detail. You can rest in the knowledge that what is meant for you will not pass you by. That delay does not mean denial. That closed doors now may be protection, and they may be making room for something better. In the waiting, God is aligning circumstances, preparing hearts, and creating opportunities that you haven't even imagined yet. And here's the beauty of divine timing. It often brings acceleration. What should have taken 10 years might happen in 2. What seems stuck can suddenly move forward. That's how God works. When it's time, nothing can stop it. The years of frustration, the tears, the prayers, the quiet obedience, they all converge into a divine moment of breakthrough. And when that moment comes, you'll realize it was worth the wait. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are right on time for God's plan. And if it feels like nothing is moving, remember this. Roots grow deep before fruit appears. Foundations are built before structures rise. And in the spiritual realm, some of the most significant transformations are happening beneath the surface, invisible to human eyes, but God sees, He knows, and He's faithful. So keep going. Keep believing, keep trusting in the one who holds time in His hands. Because when His timing aligns with your faith, transformation will come. And it will come in a way that doesn't just change your circumstances, it will change you. It will elevate you into places you never imagined. And when people ask how it happened, all you'll be able to say is it was God. That's the power of divine timing. That's the beauty of His plan. And that's what you're being prepared for right now. The Bible is filled with stories that highlight the incredible power of God's favor. These are not just ancient tales from a distant past. They are living testimonies of what God can do in a life surrendered to Him. They prove that God's favor can reach into the most unlikely places and elevate people into extraordinary positions of purpose and influence. Time and again, we see that God does not look at outward qualifications, status, or popularity. He looks at the heart, and when He places His favor on someone, everything changes. Take Joseph, for example. He was just a young man with big dreams, the youngest of many brothers, and not exactly in line for inheritance or power. In fact, his brothers were so jealous of him that they sold him into slavery. From there, Joseph's journey took him into Potiphar's house, where he served faithfully, only to be falsely accused and thrown into prison. From the outside, it looked like his story was one of tragedy and misfortune. But what people didn't see was that the favor of God was on his life. Even in the prison, Joseph was promoted and trusted. His gift of interpreting dreams eventually brought him before Pharaoh, and in one divine moment, he was elevated from a prisoner to the second most powerful man in Egypt. That kind of transformation doesn't happen without God's hand. Joseph's story reminds us that even in betrayal and injustice, favor can find you, sustain you, and lead you to a destiny greater than anything you imagine. Esther is another powerful example. She was a young Jewish woman living in exile, an orphan with no status or voice in a foreign land. But when the Persian king was searching for a new queen, Esther was chosen. This was not by coincidence or by her beauty alone. It was God's favor at work. She found favor with the king and was positioned for a purpose far greater than royalty. When her people were under threat of annihilation, it was Esther who risked her life to intervene. Because of her obedience and the favor that surrounded her, an entire nation was saved. What began as a story of loss became a story of divine purpose. Esther's life teaches us that God can raise someone from anonymity and give them influence that changes history, and He does it through favor. Then we have Ruth, a Moabite widow with no social standing or future. After losing her husband, she chose to stay with her mother-in-law, Naomi, and follow the God of Israel. She went from gathering scraps in a field to becoming the wife of Boaz, a wealthy and influential man. Ruth didn't manipulate her way into blessing. She simply remained faithful, humble, and kind. And God's favor did the rest. She became part of the lineage of King David and ultimately of Jesus Christ. Her story is proof that favor is not reserved for the elite or privileged. It finds those who are faithful, even in hardship. It turns mourning into joy and lack into legacy. David, too, was an unlikely candidate for greatness. When the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king of Israel, David wasn't even invited to the gathering. He was out tending sheep, seemingly forgotten. But God had chosen him, not because he looked the part, but because he had a heart that pursued God. That day, David was anointed king in front of his family. Yet it took years before he actually sat on the throne. During that time, he faced battles, rejection, and even ran for his life. But through it all, the favor of God never left him. Eventually, he became one of the greatest kings in Israel's history, a man after God's own heart. His life shows us that favor will find you even when others overlook you, and that it will sustain you through every valley until the promise comes to pass. These biblical stories are not just meant to inspire, they're meant to remind us that what God did then, He still does now. His favor hasn't changed. It still lifts the broken, promotes the humble, and uses the least expected. Whether you feel disqualified by your past, limited by your circumstances, or invisible in the eyes of others, know that God's favor can change everything. It can open doors no one can shut, create opportunities you couldn't have imagined, and write a story with your life that impacts generations. The same God who favored Joseph, Esther, Ruth, and David is still writing stories today, and yours might be the next testimony of what divine favor can do. Your past doesn't cancel your future. It's a truth that we need to remind ourselves of constantly, especially when we're burdened by guilt, shame, or regret over what we've done or what we've been through. Life has a way of leaving marks on us, some from decisions we've made, others from things that happened to us. And over time, it's easy to start believing that our failures define us, that our mistakes have disqualified us, and that our dreams no longer have a chance. But God's favor is greater than your past. His grace is deeper than your sin, and His plans for your life are not erased by your history. God specializes in redemption. He takes what's broken and makes it whole. He takes what's been discarded and gives it value again. In fact, many of the people God used most powerfully in Scripture were far from perfect. They were flawed, broken, and often disqualified by human standards. But their past did not stop God from fulfilling His purpose through them. If anything, their past became a backdrop that made His power even more evident. He was supposed to pull the best of the broken from the ranks that... Look at Moses. He was born into a Hebrew family, but raised in Pharaoh's palace. As a young man, he saw the suffering of his people, and in a moment of anger, he killed an Egyptian. Afraid and ashamed, he fled into the wilderness, where he spent 40 years tending sheep. To the world, it seemed like his story was over. He had fallen from privilege and hidden in obscurity. But God had not forgotten him. When the time was right, God called Moses from a burning bush and gave him the assignment to lead an entire nation out of slavery. Moses doubted himself. He pointed to his stutter, his past failure, and his unworthiness. But none of those things disqualified him in God's eyes. God's favor chose him anyway. And through that favor, Moses became one of the greatest leaders in history. And then there's the story of Rahab. She was a prostitute living in Jericho, a city marked for destruction. By societal standards, her life was hopeless. She was the kind of person many would have overlooked or condemned. But when the Israelite spies came to her city, she chose to protect them, hiding them in her home and expressing faith in their God. That act of faith, that moment of courage, changed everything. God spared her life when the city was destroyed, and even more incredibly, she was brought into the lineage of Jesus Christ. Her past didn't define her. God's favor did. And He used her story to reveal the power of redemption. Peter is another powerful example. He walked closely with Jesus. He saw miracles, heard every teaching, and made bold declarations of loyalty. But when the moment of testing came, Peter denied even knowing Jesus. Not once, but 3 times. The weight of that failure crushed him. He wept bitterly, believing he had blown his chance to be part of God's plan. Yet after the resurrection, Jesus personally restored him. He didn't hold Peter's failure against him. Instead, He commissioned him to feed His sheep and lead His church. On the day of Pentecost, it was Peter who preached the message that brought thousands to salvation. That's what favor does. It takes a broken man and gives him a new beginning. Even the Apostle Paul, who wrote much of the New Testament, had a past that many would consider unforgivable. Before his conversion, he persecuted Christians, oversaw arrest, and even approved of executions. But on the road to Damascus, he encountered the grace of God in a way that changed his entire life. From that point on, he was never the same. God used him to spread the gospel across nations, plant churches, and write letters that continue to guide believers today. His past didn't cancel his future. It became the platform for God's glory. All of these stories and so many more point to one clear truth. God's favor isn't based on your perfection. It's based on His purpose. If you're still breathing,